Most gardeners throw away potting soil way too early. The moment a container mix stops producing the way it did the first season, people assume the soil is used up. They dump it, buy another bag, and repeat the cycle year after year. The real problem isn't that the soil is dead. The problem is that the biology inside that soil collapsed. Once the microbial life disappears, the soil stops cycling nutrients, water retention drops, and plant roots basically sit in sterile filler. What brings that soil back to life isn't fertilizer, it's microbial density. And the fastest way I've found to rebuild that biology is something I call micro-compost. If you're serious about growing food, subscribe to the channel, because this is exactly the kind of practical soil management that makes the difference between average yields and beds that produce consistently for years. Most gardeners try to fix dead soil with fertilizer when the real problem is biology. When potting soil stops producing, the usual advice is to add more fertilizer. Liquid feed, slow-release pellets, compost tea, whatever is popular at the moment. But fertilizer doesn't rebuild soil biology. It just feeds plants directly, and sometimes it even suppresses microbial activity if you overdo it. What I've seen repeatedly in container gardens and raised beds is that once the microbial engine slows down, the soil loses its ability to cycle nutrients. You can pour nutrients in all day, but the system isn't working the way healthy soil should. Healthy soil works like a biological machine. Microbes break down organic matter, fungi, move nutrients to roots, bacteria, convert nitrogen into plant-available forms. When that chain breaks, everything slows down. Micro-compost rebuilds that chain. Micro-compost works because it concentrates microbial activity in a very small volume. Traditional composting works, but it takes time and space. Not everyone has a big pile running in the backyard. Micro-compost is basically a way to create highly active compost in small batches and use it to inoculate depleted soil. Instead of waiting months for a full pile to mature, you create a concentrated microbial starter and blend it back into your garden soil or potting mix. In practice, the mix is simple. I usually start with 1 part finished compost, 1 part shredded carbon material like cardboard or dry leaves, and 1 part nitrogen material such as kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, or fresh grass clippings. The key is moisture and oxygen. The material should feel like a wrung-out sponge and stay loosely packed so microbes can breathe. When that mix is managed properly, microbial activity ramps up quickly. Temperatures can climb into the 120 to 140 degree Fahrenheit range within a couple of days, which is where decomposition really accelerates. Temperature tells you if the compost biology is actually working. One of the biggest mistakes I see gardeners make is guessing. They assume their compost pile is active, but they have no idea what's actually happening inside it. Compost is a biological reaction, and like any biological system, temperature tells you a lot about what's going on. When microbial activity spikes, the pile heats up, and when activity slows, the temperature drops. Without measuring that, you're basically working blind. That's why I keep a compost thermometer in my pile. The one I've been using lately is the RioTemp 20-inch backyard compost thermometer. It's just a simple stainless steel probe with a dial that shows the temperature zones, but it reaches deep into the pile, so you're actually measuring the core where the microbes are working. If you're curious about it, I left a link to the thermometer in the description. It's not required, but if you're trying to dial in compost activity, having real temperature data makes the process much easier. Once the micro-compost heats up, the biology is multiplying. When the center of that mix climbs above about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, microbial reproduction is happening fast. Bacteria populations explode under those conditions. That's exactly what you want, because those microbes are the workers that rebuild soil ecosystems. In a micro-compost system, the goal isn't to produce a massive pile of finished compost. the goal is to create a dense microbial inoculant. Usually after about 5 to 7 days, the temperature peaks and begins to decline. That's when the compost is perfect for reintroducing biology into depleted soil. Reviving container soil with micro-compost is surprisingly simple. If I'm restoring potting soil from last season, I usually start by loosening the old mix and blending in about 20% micro-compost by volume. So for a 10-gallon container, I'll add roughly 2 gallons of the micro-compost mix. After that, I hydrate the soil thoroughly and let it sit for about 3 to 5 days before planting. During that time, microbes spread through the soil profile and start breaking down organic material that was previously unavailable to plants. What's interesting is just how quickly the soil texture can change. It goes from being dusty and lifeless to looking darker, crumbly, and even a bit spongy again. That's really the microbial community at work, rebuilding the soil structure. And honestly, raised beds seem to respond even better, mostly because they already contain a fair bit of organic material. In raised beds, the process actually works even faster, since there's already organic matter present. Instead of mixing compost all the way through the bed, I'll usually just apply a thin half-inch layer right across the surface and then lightly rake it in. After that, I give the bed a good, deep watering. Within about a week, microbial activity spreads through the top several inches of soil, which is where most of those feeder roots are located. And that's really enough to jumpstart the soil food web all over again. Hydroponic growers can use the same idea in a controlled way. Even hydroponic growers can use the micro-compost concept, although the application is different. In hydro systems, you don't want raw compost entering the reservoir. Instead, a small amount of mature compost can be steeped in aerated water for about 24 hours to create a microbial extract. That liquid can then be filtered and introduced into systems like drip irrigation or coco coir beds. The microbes colonize the root zone and help stabilize nutrient cycling. It's not traditional hydroponics, but honestly, it works extremely well in hybrid soilless systems. The real advantage of micro-compost is speed. Traditional compost piles can take 2 to 4 months to mature. Micro-compost, when managed correctly, can produce a powerful microbial inoculant in about a week. That speed makes it useful during the growing season when soil starts showing signs of fatigue. If tomatoes in a container start slowing down mid-season, adding a few handfuls of micro-compost around the root zone can often restart growth within days. The microbes begin breaking down organic particles in the soil, releasing nutrients that were already there but locked away. Good gardeners eventually realize the soil food web matters more than fertilizer. Once you see this process working, it really changes how you think about soil management. Instead of constantly feeding plants, you start feeding the microbial system that feeds the plants. That shift is what separates productive gardens from gardens that struggle year after year. Healthy soil becomes more resilient, holds water better, and produces stronger root systems. All of that translates into healthier plants and better harvests. The real beauty of micro-compost is that it compounds over time. Each application strengthens the microbial network in your soil. After a couple of seasons, you'll notice something interesting. The soil doesn't crash anymore at the end of the growing season. It stays active because the microbial populations are stable. At that point, instead of constantly buying new potting mix, you're simply maintaining living soil. And that's when gardening gets easier. If you found this useful and you're serious about growing better food at home, make sure you subscribe to the Farm Logic channel and share this video with another gardener who's tired of throwing away dead potting soil, because once you understand how to rebuild soil biology, you stop chasing fertilizers and start building soil that gets better every year.